Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today was Ready Up, looking specifically at the Dragonhunter Elite Specialization for the Guardian, and as well as this we actually got some extra changes announced too. They actually went a lot more exhaustive on this one than they did with the Chronomancer. They have all the art in place for the Elite Specialization and a lot of progress has obviously been made with the trait system, and they actually showed us every single trait associated with the new Elite Specialization. They showed us all the new weapon skills, and they showed us all of the new utility skills. Everything is displayed here. I'm not sure whether they were in the Dragonhunter armor, but hey, that's still pretty good, right? I actually wasn't expecting Arenanet to do this. I thought they'd leave some, under the table, maybe just leave out one Grandmaster, two Grandmasters, just so there was that bit of mystery right up until launch. But we can fully judge this thing right now, and we can say whether we want to play it or not. Now, I'm going to talk to you guys through everything that was detailed to us and my take on it, though I will specify I'm not really much of a mathematician, so even though the information's there now, you might want to look in other places to see whether this is going to be like some kind of dungeon meta thing. I'm not sure how much the new specialization's flat damage boosts compare to, say, some of the other lines they could be specializing in. At any rate, before we get into specific Dragonhunter stuff, let's have a look just at the Guardian. Now, there was a comment in the live stream from John Peters, I believe, talking about the changes to the tomes. Now, you guys will remember when they revealed the specialization system in general to us, they seemed really wishy-washy on what the hell they were doing with a lot of skills, and the Guardian tomes in particular were a big problem. The Guardian tomes were supposed to be forced into an existing skill class so they could be traded, but they really don't fit. They clearly weren't shouts, they weren't signets, they weren't anything that Guardians currently have. So how did they think about fixing this? Now, this isn't necessarily going to be what we'll see, but then there was a post on the official forums talking about this idea. They're saying that they would change the two tome skills completely into one of them into a signet, the healing tome into a signet, and the offensive tome, the tome of wrath, into a shout. So there would no longer be skills that you activate and you get this cool flavorful book and you get a whole new skill bar and a bunch of new Guardian weapons. They would just be abilities you activate on your bar and have some kind of immediate effect there. So with the Guardian would lose a little bit of flavor from this, but don't cringe too much. Do consider with what I'm about to say that the tomes have been really terrible across all three game types since launch, and the devs seem to have never wanted to touch them up. They've been competing with an incredibly powerful other elite, Renewed Focus, which has played a lot into the Guardian playstyle of invulnerability and defensive stuff, and recharged their virtues, allowing them to be very supportive. It's just been an incredible elite, and rarely you'd take anything else. So this change actually will, although these skills will lose some flavor, potentially make them viable. Now, the suggestion would be to change the healing tome into a signet that grants, I believe they said every 10 seconds or so, a point-blank area of effect heal around you. I'm not sure I like this idea of like a spiky heal coming out randomly every now and then. Like, I feel like there should be play to it. The Guardian should be controlling it. I'm going to rage really hard if some Guardian is theoretically running this new elite signet, and the only reason they survive is because they got a lucky proc on the signet that had nothing to do with it the last second. So I'd like to see actual play to this, maybe make it a constant thing that's ticking out or much more frequently, or change the idea of the passive completely. But that would be the passive, and in theory would be quite a significant passive too, especially add a lot to the idea of a healing Guardian. And the active would actually proc Light of Deliverance. Light of Deliverance is the skill 5, the big wombo combo ability we see currently on the book. When you activate skill 5, this heals people for 100% of their health. This is actually kind of an annoying skill to me. Like, don't get me wrong, I very much like the flavor of it, and I think that, with the right recharge on it, this could be a really fantastic, cool, fun thing for Guardians to do. No having to summon the book, no having to wait on other cooldowns. You just hit the signet when you want, and you max heal everyone around you. That does sound like a fun elite, but my problems with it have always come down to the mechanics of it. If you look at stuff like Silverwaste, I play an Elementalist, and I try damn hard to support those friggin' siege carriers moving in and out and keep them nice and healed up, and it really frustrates me that Guardians who play nothing into healing power at all, nothing on their bar has any synergy with supporting and healing stuff, can just run the tome and they'll do like a 50k heal on these damn carriers. I think that really sucks. I'd like to see the mechanics change a little bit so it does actually scale with supportive builds and people who are building for supportive gear and supportive traits and stuff. So that would be my suggestion for that as well, but otherwise it seems like an okay skill. And of course, because it's a signet, it would then have all the signet-related traits that Guardian currently enjoys and be even potentially better. Also, that would give it more synergy with build making, and that I agree with too, rather than having just tomes that exist outside of the rest of your build and they're just kind of on your bar. And so the other skill, the other tome, the Tome of Wrath, this would become a shout. And so this would then be instant activation. And the main flavor thing for the Tome of Wrath right now that people like is, I mean, I get the skill one's kind of cool. It's got a lot of interesting stuff about it, but the numbers have just always been off. But this thing will actually pass out quickness. The current tome does. The idea here would be we'd get a shout that gives quickness and fury. So it's not the same as a time warp. You might immediately be like, well, that just doesn't sound different enough to the Mesmer. Don't forget, though, that the Mesmer will have longer duration, quickness very likely. It is also in a field rather than an instant thing that the Guardian passes out. And you don't just give the quickness to yourself as the Guardian, you're actually giving that to your allies too. So, and again, lastly, this would then work with all the shout traits that Guardians currently have and stuff like Soldier Runes. So this would cleanse a condition as well if you wanted that also. Actually, these two changes would make these very, very interesting skills, in fact, quite overpowered in various situations, and I think for a lot of Guardians is one of the most exciting things that's come out of this live stream, and it has nothing to do with the Dragonhunter. So that's their ideas right now. Something even better about this, though, something that catches my eye, even though I don't play Guardian. And this was the comment that the tomes would, if they in theory change to a signet and a shout, the tomes wouldn't be removed forever. The idea of tomes would come back in a future elite specialization. This is a really cool thing to hear from the devs. Why? Because it means they already have a view to the Gen 2 elite specializations. I do not believe for a second that they are thinking of adding these tomes to an as yet unannounced Heart of Thorns elite specialization. I think they probably have a good idea of what all of those are doing already, and so the idea that they're prospectively now going to change the Guardian and thinking of putting tomes back onto a new one is really cool. It actually shrinks, in my mind, that potential timescale we have to wait for the Gen 1 ones to finish and the Gen 2 ones to come out. Again, it's like I was mentioning yesterday, people might be disappointed with the Dragonhunter because it taps into a niche of Guardian gameplay, or just gameplay in general, I suppose, that they're not interested in. And so for those people, they're feeling a bit sour because they're like, oh, I have to wait an indeterminate amount of time now for another elite specialization before I can finally feel like my main character has something new to play with. And, you know, that's a valid thing for those people to be concerned about. So to hear something like this, that they're already thinking about the next elite specializations, that's reassuring to hear. Alright, so there you go, that's the elite stuff. Let's look at Dragonhunter specifically. The footage in the background will have been showing Dragonhunter stuff already. There'll be a mix of some other things in there that I'll be showing. The F skills were the first things that they showed off. They showed the F1 and this idea of the tether, which we heard in the blog, but it was kind of vague. This tether is an awful lot like the skill 5 for Necromancers in Death Shroud. If you walk over 900 range away from your target after you've tethered to them, it will snap. But while that tether is there, it will constantly reapply burning to your target. Now that might sound kind of weird. It's like, why would I care too much about that? That doesn't sound too fun. Remember, burning stacks intensity, so this is actually helping you to get more intense Condi stuff coming off. And they do demonstrate as well that it does pierce, and if you pierce 5 targets at once, as they do with the golems, it will tether all 5 of them, and you'll be connected to all 5 of them. They even then show that if you were to recharge this, like through the trait we discussed yesterday, where it will instantly recharge on killing a foe, and you throw another one, another tether will appear too. So the tethers will stack, and then the burning will be going even higher. So you can have like tons of tethers going around if you're getting the AoE hits enough, and that's kind of exciting. There's also another trait specific to Dragonhunter that will allow it to recharge as well, which I'll talk about in a second. The F2 they showed, there's really not too much more to say on this. They did specify that the passives of the new F abilities are the exact same passives as the old F abilities. This disappoints me. I would have liked to have seen them get some different flavor. At the moment, the F2 just feels an awful lot like the regular virtues. That said, the trait to make the F2 attack, they said the animation might not be totally in there, and to me it doesn't feel impactful at all. But this will actually immobilize as well, and that's going to have some synergy with Guardian to want to burst people down quickly, because currently Guardian doesn't have too convincing of a way to like get a hard stun or immob on someone before they go in for their burst with the Judge's Intervention Focus 5 combo or something, right? You know, rolling into a Greatsword 2. Well, now you can use your Engage on the F2, that immobes them, and then they're free for the picking. So this should open up some other angles on existing Guardian roles, like Mediguards. And finally, the F3, they demonstrated the shield. It actually doesn't protect as much as I thought it was going to, but again, there is a trait that does expand that, and there will be some footage somewhere in this video. Sorry if it's not all relevant exactly as I talk of it, but there will be some footage in there of this wall actually looking a fair bit bigger. So there's your F abilities. Next, they looked at the bow. Now, the bow was pretty much how they described it in the, you kind of attack a bit slower, but they are bigger hits. In fact, I think it was the skill 2 they showed is a huge chunk of damage. It had 1,500 damage as a base hit. That's a big attack. It's a wind-up attack too. The auto was actually a bouncing attack, puncture shot, and this would actually cripple foes if it hit more than one enemy, which again is like new tech. Now this is subtle, but what this means is it will hit the first enemy, and it won't cripple them. Then it will bounce to a second enemy, and should it then land on the second enemy, the original enemy, even though they haven't necessarily been struck again, will then be crippled. It's kind of a curious little quirk about that there we haven't seen on other skills in GW2 as far as I'm aware. But that's the way that works. So there is actually an awful lot of cripple associated with the Dragonhunter. They have a trait that increases damage to crippled foes and various ways of applying it. Their skill 3 is the deflecting shot, which the blog talked about. Now this is much more of a utility thing rather than doing a lot of damage. This will indeed, as it's demonstrated, as you fire it, if any projectiles are coming at you, it will destroy those projectiles. And it was actually mentioned specifically that you can use this in a supportive way. You might just think, oh, this is only going to be really niche, we barely ever use this, we're just going to use it while someone like a longbow ranger is plinking away at me and I get to fire my longbow shot back and get a great deflecting shot off. Well, actually, you can fire it at your allies or near your allies and like cut across the paths of other incoming projectiles and save lives. Obviously, the dream scenario here is a massive kill shot coming in and you manage to deflecting shot suddenly off like 180 degrees to your side and you manage to, the perfect time, stop the kill shot. That's some incredible play that the Guild Wars 2 PvP scene could use us seeing more of. But yeah, so that's the idea of deflecting shot. This actually also blinds foes. Then the skill 4 is the symbol of energy. This actually has a new ground target effect, which it's stupid and superficial of me, but I kind of enjoy. It's got reasonable flat damage on it. You can choose where you want it to land. It will, as they stated, apply vigor to allies, and it will burn enemies who are stood inside it. The skill 5, finally, is the kind of barrage-ish looking ability. This doesn't technically count as an arrow for certain traits that we'll talk about soon, but this is exactly what it looked like. It's that snare we saw from the trailer, and pretty much all is as we thought. There is no mode switching, and given the lukewarm reception to the Dragonhunter, I wonder whether they now regret having taken that out, if it ever was a thing, and whether they're just happy with how the longbow's looking in general. So, moving on, they then looked at the traps. Now, traps are pretty cool. I was thinking, just like with the Ranger and the Thief traps, they would kind of proc in an area, and then they would just like, there would be a rolling AoE on that spot that ticks like once a second, and the only difference between them is the animation and the conditions that they apply. It's not that at all, actually. Each trap is really distinct. One trap basically functions like a static field, except it doesn't stun people moving in it. So the idea is, if you trigger this trap, suddenly all around you, these great walls of light, spiky, damaging light surround you, and you're like, oh god, and it didn't necessarily do any damage to you, but now that you've triggered the trap, you're stuck in that little area unless you bite the bullet and go through, and it does a lot of damage. They even demonstrated the idea of you use this trap on someone, they try and leave, and then you immediately knock them back into it, and it actually chunks the golems that they're testing this stuff on for quite a lot of damage. There was another trap that was like a spinning blade trap, and when this one procced, it just started firing 10 hits of damage in like this spinning like saw kind of motion. There's a trait, of course, that we already heard about that will inflict bleeds on traps, and so this trap actually has a lot of synergy with that trait, while maybe the static field one doesn't so much, because one of them is going to apply 10 bleeds if something stays in it. Let's say it's PvE and it's not going to dodge away, and the other one, of course, will only apply bleeds when they walk through it the once. So there's actually a bit more to the traps you choose and the traits you pick for them than at first it might have looked. The next trap was Light Judgment. This one was probably my favourite. Now this applies 25 vulnerability. The idea of this trap is it creates like this giant homing light, and it's kind of like the Guardian saying, yo, this guy is marked, we can kill him. And so it applies 25 vulnerability for people who are in the trap, but this vulnerability is incredibly short duration. It just ticks very quickly, so it pulses. So some people have been saying, hey, we might end up running this in dungeons or something. Do consider, though, because this is incredibly short duration vulnerability, it might not be better still than Ellie's casting Glyph of Storms, or just bringing an NG who's going to apply a lot of longer duration vulnerability. And like, once that trap's gone, all you've really done is strip what the longer duration stuff was, but maybe this isn't going to be a big issue. Anyway, 25 vulnerability is cool across all three game types. Kind of makes me question if they've ended up designing skills that immediately put 25 vuln on something, Doesn't that kind of suggest that there's a problem with Vuln and that it's too weak? Like, if you have to crank it to the max before it really feels like an impactful skill? I don't know. So anyway, that hits to 25, and the other really cool thing is this actually applies revealed. And so Guardians, especially Mediguards, have been like big counters to Thieves for a while now, and I like that setup. I like a little bit of rock, paper, scissors, and the fact that the Guardians now have, or Dragon Hunters, also have a tool of now dealing with Thieves by dropping this trap on themselves. You know, a Thief jumps them, oh god, they have massive revealed on them, and 25 vulnerability, and then they can get sort of slaughtered. So that's a really cool thing, and more revealed play has been desperately needed in this game for a long time. Stealth is way too strong and way too accessible. It's the most frustrating stuff in the entire damn game. So yeah, more revealed. The final trap for me to talk about is the Dragon's Maw. Dragon's Maw is a little bit like the Chronomancer Elite in that it will pull enemies into it. However, then it does apply slow as well. So if you hit the Dragon's Maw, it looks like a giant bear trap, except that bear trap is a giant dragon head that snaps its jaw. And it also does big damage. Many of these traps, in fact, have got big base damage, just as we speculated before. All of these traps down on one spot just does insane damage, rolling damage, and the Dragon's Maw helps to ensure people stay in there. Don't forget about the changes to stability. Again, think of this idea. What I'm most excited about is playing a bunch of Dragon Hunters in World vs. World and setting a horrible trap for a Zerg. Because stability is different now. 5 Dragons more coming off. Even if people pop stab, this could end up breaking through it. You know, you have all your traps down, a ring of warding, and people really are going to be stuck once that Dragon's Maw hits them, and they're going to take a lot of damage. So that's a very cool trap, and we did get a demonstration of that being used specifically when killing one of the, I believe it was the Chieftain, one of the forest NPCs. Oh, my mistake. No, there is one more trap as well. This was Fragment of Faith. This was a very cool one as well. What this will do is after the trap blows up, it drops all these little shards of light around the area. They're a lot like med packs that engineers will be throwing around. And if you walk into one of these shards of light, it gives you Aegis. Aegis is so strong, and there were tons of them around on the floor. Seems very, very strong, and exactly the kind of new supporty skill I was hoping to see. You know, I actually think this is so cool and so flavorful as an ability. This should have been mentioned in the initial block. The idea that people can walk around and actually collect these little shards and give themselves Aegis is really fun, or that the Dragon Hunter themselves can pop this trap. Now they've rigged the environment that they're in their favor. So if you're in a 1v1 and someone's popped this trap, they're going to want to take you away from that, because whenever you like, you can now just walk in and give yourself free blocks, and that is huge. That is very, very, very strong. These are dangerous things, and they're dangerous in ways that isn't just them doing tons of damage, which would be stupid. So that trap also cribbles, and that's pretty much it. Let's have a look at the traits. God, how did this video get so long? First, let's have a look at the minors. Now, the first minor is simply the one that will change your virtue, so it's a non-existent minor, really. It doesn't mean anything. If you're a Dragon Hunter, one of your minors is wasted because it's just the description of, oh, hey, your F ability's changed. So there's that. The second minor is actually something I referenced a little bit earlier, and this means that whenever you block an attack, and as far as I understand, this is what they mean, whenever you block an attack, you will instantly recharge your F1. So not only are you throwing spears whenever you kill a foe, but you can also instantly recharge this thing every time you block something, which is really cool and allows you to maintain that kind of distance, chucking your spears away. The spears have got base damage on them, and they have Condi potential there on the burning, so it's just kind of a really cool little minor and something additional that Dragon Hunters get. Whenever they block, their blocking means more than, say, blocking something on a Guardian. And lastly, the idea, again, a core idea behind the Dragon Hunter is it's more of a ranged fight, more of a backliney guy, and so the final minor, the Grandmaster minor, does reflect this. This means that you will do more damage to foes who are far away from you, very similar to an engineer trait that may or may not now have been taken out of the game, or may not still exist. So yeah, you will do more damage, and the idea here is you want to keep your range, and you get a pretty nice little flat buff there, which again they kind of showed off in the stream. So let's look at the traits we can choose. Your choice in the adept slot is to make your traps bleed, which of course again has more synergy with certain traps. You have the choice to do extra damage to crippled foes, which you can be applying quite a lot of cripple, or you have the option of getting Wings of Resolve to do damage and immobilize. I really like, though, all three of these choices. They're all kind of offensive choices. It's like, do you want, like, your Condi trap kind of angle for some damage? Do you want some flat damage for the crippled people? And 10% is not shabby. 10% is very, very strong. Or do you want the kind of utility gap closing, immobing thing that allows you to set up much more big hits? I think all three of these are viable. And actually, this is one of the strongest kind of which of the three do you want to pick decisions we've seen the devs have managed to design in the new specialization system. I think this is really good, and actually is going to be a bit of a head scratcher for a lot of Dragon Hunters. Really, really cool, and I like the adept slot. The master slot gives you 3 kind of more defensive options. The first one is to gain stability every time you hit someone with true shot. Now, true shot is the skill 2 on the longbow. It's the one you charge up and has the massive base damage, the 1,500 that we already had listed. And so this would allow you, again, to maintain your role as a very sturdy, very strong guy at the back, sort of smashing away. And they did remind us, again, that true shot pierces. So not only will it do huge damage to one target, if there's someone else behind it, it will do huge damage to them too. And both hits will then give you stabs, so you can get a lot more if you're getting the right angles off. Really kind of cool. Add some skill shotty play to the longbow. The second master trait is Bulwark. This improves your F3 ability. So in the first slot, we had our F2 choice for improvement. Now we get the F3 choice. This will make it bigger, which of course means it's easier to defend allies with it, and more of your front is actually covered physically. It's hard to give a numeric on how useful that would be, but they do also say that this makes your Shield of Courage last longer too. Again, there's a demonstration of it in the footage. The final trait is Dulled Senses, and this gives you cripple on knockback. Now, on its own, that sounds really bad, and I was like, what the hell? Why? That just doesn't sound very good. But, again, think about the fact that we've got the cripple damage trait already, and there are already a variety of ways for Guardians to be knocking people back. So, let's say you've got your longbow out, you can knock someone back, they'll be crippled as they're trying to close the gap, you're actually hitting them harder already. So it does have some synergy, and it has even further synergy when we look at the Grandmaster traits. So these are the last ones, guys. There is, first of all, Apply Protection when using a Virtue. They said that this might change, that this might not be fun enough, and I think I agree, though this is one of the more supportish options you see that the Dragon Hunters have actually had available to them. The second trait is called Heavy Light. This Grandmaster means that your longbow arrows will knock back enemies when they are close to you. So there you go. Now, it specifically says arrows, so like the symbol, and I believe the skill 5 won't actually cause this. But now think about the fact that when we cripple, we do more damage, and then when we knock back, we're going to be applying cripple. So that's kind of your synergy there. I like the idea. However, I do think, as a friend mentioned to me, there's a little bit too much RNG to it. Like on a 7-second cooldown, I don't know how much play Guardians are really going to have that every 7 seconds they know this is going to come through. And that's going to really suck, again, to be fighting a Dragon Hunter and he gets a lucky kill or some really incredible things happen that he had no control over. I really hate the idea of RNG on something as powerful as a knockback. I hate that, you know, the only reason we see no variety on the friggin' pets in PvP is because of the knockdown on the auto attack on the pets, which yes can be controlled a little, but 90% of the time it's not. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. I don't want to see that too much on this class, but there will be some play around it, because if you're out of that range and they attack you, it's not going to proc. So there is that. And then there's even the idea as well of like knocking people back with the bow using this trait into a trap, say, and then the trap does tons of damage and it's doing even more damage because they're crippled, and so on. The final Grandmaster trait is called Big Game Hunter. 15% more damage flat. This is one of the biggest flat damage traits we see. The only ones that go higher are to 20%, and this will also apply vulnerable if you hit someone who is tethered with your F1. I was really happy to see this because this means that the F1 will be something Dragon Hunters really want to pay attention to, and they focus, and it becomes kind of an integral part of their rotations in theory, just so that they can get this massive damage boost and the extra vuln throwing around. So I actually really like the design of Big Game Hunter. I think the numbers are pretty solid on it too. And there you go, guys. That's the Dragon Hunter. I really like the design of a lot of the choices we have in traits. I think the longbow, if it was the old mode switching idea, could have really fleshed this class out a lot more. And overall, of course, though things may change, I'm quite happy, and especially with the tome changes we talked about at the start of this video, and the idea of running those tomes, those new tomes, or, you know, Signet and Shout on Dragon Hunters and stuff, really puts the Guardian into a pretty exciting place. Anyway, there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching, and I guess I'll see you tomorrow for maybe some more updates if more information has come out, or whatever we fancy doing. Cheers, guys.